A Hell's Angel leader found a pregnant girl crying. What he did next changed everyone's lives. It all starts on a dark, rainy night when a feared biker leader steps outside and finds a trembling pregnant girl sobbing behind his clubhouse. He wants nothing to do with her until she whispers a secret name no one alive should know. Suddenly, this tough man who believes he's cursed is dragged back into a past he's spent years trying to outrun. But this girl isn't just running for her life. She's carrying a baby connected to a hidden betrayal, one powerful people would do anything to keep buried. And when danger closes in, the biker leader must decide, protect her or lose yet another innocent soul to the curse he fears. What truth is this unborn baby holding, and why are so many willing to kill for it? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The rain drummed steadily against the metal roof of the clubhouse, matching the pounding in Legend O'Rourke's head. The leadership meeting had left him drained, with heated arguments about territory still echoing in his mind. He needed air, even if it meant getting soaked. Pushing open the heavy back door, Legend stepped into the darkness. The cold drops hit his face, offering brief relief from the stuffy interior. He breathed in deeply, letting the clean scent of rain wash away the lingering smell of cigarettes and tension. That's when he heard it, a soft sound barely audible over the rainfall. A whimper, then a muffled sob coming from near the dumpsters. Legend's hand instinctively moved to the knife at his belt as he edged toward the noise. In the dim light spilling from the security lamp, he saw her. A young woman was huddled against the brick wall, her clothes completely drenched. Her arms were wrapped protectively around a clearly pregnant belly, and she was shaking, whether from cold or fear, he couldn't tell. Probably both. "Hey!" Legend barked, making her flinch. "This is private property." The woman looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes. Mascara had run down her cheeks, mixing with the rain. She couldn't have been more than 25. Legend felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the warning sign he'd learned to heed. Getting involved meant risk. Risk meant loss. He'd buried enough people to know better. "Snake! Hammer!" he called out, and two of his men appeared at the door almost immediately. "Get her out of here." The bikers moved forward, their heavy boots splashing through puddles. The woman pressed herself harder against the wall, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. "Please," she whispered, but Legend had already turned away. He couldn't afford to care. Not again. "Legend," her voice was barely audible. Then, "Cole O'Rourke?" Legend froze. That name. That forbidden name that no one had spoken in years. He spun around, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Stop," he ordered his men, who had just reached for the woman's arms. "Where did you hear that name?" His voice was dangerously quiet. With trembling fingers, she reached into her wet coat. Legend tensed, but what she pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was a small, tarnished locket. The clasp was broken, hanging by a thread. She held it out to him. Legend stepped closer, fighting against every instinct screaming at him to walk away. When he took the locket, his fingers were steady, but his pulse was racing. Inside was a photo he'd tried for years to forget. Sarah's smile beamed up at him, frozen in time, forever 23. His dead fiancé's face stared back at him, a ghost from the past he'd buried along with her. Thunder rolled overhead, deep and threatening. The woman, barely more than a girl, really, swayed on her feet. Without thinking, Legend reached out to steady her. Her skin was ice cold through the wet fabric of her sleeve. "Snake, Hammer, go back inside," he said, his voice rough. They hesitated for just a moment before following his order. The woman's teeth were chattering now, her arms still cradled around her stomach. Legend looked at her, then at the locket, then back at her. The curse whispered in his mind, reminding him of everyone he'd lost. But he couldn't leave her out here, not in this condition, not with Sarah's photo in his hand. "Come on," he said gruffly, putting an arm around her shoulders. She was so small against him, so fragile. "Let's get you warm." He guided her toward the door, feeling her trembling against his side. Each step felt like a battle against his better judgment, against years of self-imposed isolation. But something about her knowing that name, having that locket, it demanded answers. Legend reached for the clubhouse door, his calloused hand gripping the handle. He could feel the weight of the decision as heavily as the rain on his shoulders. Opening this door meant more than just letting her in from the storm. It meant breaking his own rules, risking the curse that had claimed everyone else he'd ever cared about. He pulled the door open, the warm light from inside spilling out into the rain. "Watch your step," he said quietly, helping her over the threshold. As they entered the clubhouse, Legend felt the familiar walls he'd built around himself begin to crack, just slightly, like the first fracture in a dam. The door closed behind them with a heavy thud, sealing them both into whatever was about to unfold. The kitchen's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Legend guided Mara through the clubhouse's main room. Old-timers playing cards at the corner table fell silent, their weathered faces growing tense. They knew the stories. They'd attended the funerals. "Sit," Legend said, pulling out a wooden chair at the kitchen table. His voice was gruff, but not unkind. Mara sank into it, water dripping from her clothes onto the linoleum floor. Big Mike, the club's cook, shifted uncomfortably at the counter. "Boss, you sure about—" "Get her some tea," Legend cut him off. "The herbal kind, and a towel." While Mike filled the kettle, other members drifted closer, curious but maintaining their distance. The curse wasn't something they talked about openly, but everyone knew. Legend's fiancée, his sister, his best friend, all dead within months of getting close to him. Some called it coincidence. Others weren't so sure. Mara's hands shook as she accepted the steaming mug and wrapped her fingers around its warmth. A thick bath towel draped over her shoulders helped stop her shivering. Legend stood against the counter, arms crossed, studying her with guarded eyes. "The locket," he said finally. "Explain." Mara took a careful sip of tea before speaking. "I grew up in foster care. My foster mother, she used to sing this lullaby when I couldn't sleep." Her voice was soft but steady. "It was about a man named Cole with a wounded heart. She sang it almost every night." Legend's jaw tightened. In the corner, old Jimmy cursed under his breath and left the room. The others watched, tension thick in the air. "That's impossible," Legend said quietly. "That lullaby was special," Mara finished. "Written by someone who loved you very much." Legend moved suddenly, pulling out the chair across from her and sitting down. His fingers traced the broken edge of the locket. "Sarah wrote this song. No one else knew it." "Look inside again," Mara urged gently. "The inscription." Legend's hands were steady as he opened the locket fully, tilting it under the harsh kitchen light. There, engraved in tiny letters along the inner rim, were words he hadn't seen in 8 years. "To my wounded warrior, your heart's not cursed, just blessed with too much love." The kettle whistled sharply, making several people jump. Big Mike quickly took it off the heat, but Legend didn't even seem to notice. His eyes were fixed on the inscription. "Sarah said those words to me the night before." He stopped abruptly, his face hardening. How did you get this?" Outside, rain drummed against the windows as Mara wrapped her hands tighter around her mug. "My foster mother told me it was left with her by a woman running from betrayal. She said the woman was scared, desperate. She made my foster mother promise to keep the locket safe and teach her children the song." "When was this?" 8 years ago. Right after—" Mara hesitated. "Right after the accident that killed your fiancé." The kitchen had emptied now, the other bikers finding reasons to be elsewhere. Only Big Mike remained, pretending to wipe down the already clean counter while keeping a protective eye on the situation. Legend stared at the locket for a long moment. Sarah died in a car crash. She was alone. The police confirmed it. "Are you sure?" Mara asked quietly. The question hung in the air between them. Legend's knuckles went white around the locket before he carefully set it down on the table. He stood up abruptly. "It's late," he said, his voice rough. "You need rest." Hours passed. Most of the club members had gone to their rooms or headed home. The rain had settled into a gentle patter against the windows when Legend led Mara down the wet street to the safe house. It was a simple 2-story building the club kept for emergencies, its brown brick facade unremarkable among the other structures on the block. "You can stay here tonight," Legend said as he unlocked the door. "Just tonight. Tomorrow morning you leave." Inside, he showed her to a small but clean room with a twin bed and basic furnishings. "Bathrooms down the hall. Kitchen stocked if you're hungry." Mara stood in the doorway, one hand resting on her swollen belly. "Thank you," she said softly. "I know what it cost you to help me." Legend's face remained impassive. "One night?" he repeated. "Lock the door behind me." He waited until he heard the deadbolt click before walking onto the covered porch. The rain fell in a fine mist now, creating halos around the streetlights. Legend pulled the locket from his pocket, its familiar weight somehow heavier than before. Standing there in the gentle rain, he ran his thumb over the inscription one more time. The words felt like accusations now, or maybe warnings. 8 years he'd lived with the certainty that his curse had killed Sarah. 8 years of keeping everyone at arm's length to protect them. Now, holding a piece of the past he thought he'd buried, Legend wondered if the ghosts he'd been running from had finally caught up to him. Not to claim another victim, but to unearth secrets he never knew existed. The morning sun had barely risen when Legend pulled up to the safe house, balancing a paper bag of breakfast sandwiches and 2 steaming coffee cups. He'd spent most of the night sitting in his office, turning the locket over and over in his hands, wrestling with memories he'd tried hard to forget. As he approached the door, he heard movement inside. Using his key, he entered to find Mara already awake, methodically folding what looked like all her worldly possessions, a few worn shirts and a single pair of jeans, into a neat pile on the sofa bed. "You're up early," he said, setting the food down on the small kitchen counter. Mara smoothed her hands over the folded clothes. "I wanted to be ready to go. I know I promised to leave this morning." She looked up at him with tired eyes. "I'm sorry for intruding into your world like this. The locket... I shouldn't have..." "Here," Legend interrupted, holding out one of the coffee cups. "Decaf, and there's egg sandwiches." She took a step toward him, but suddenly swayed on her feet. Legend moved quickly, catching her by the shoulders before she could stumble. As he steadied her, he felt a sharp, distinct movement against his forearm where it pressed against her belly. They both froze. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, and Legend found himself unable to pull away. It had been so long since he'd allowed himself to be this close to anyone, let alone something so vibrantly alive. The moment stretched between them, filled with the simple wonder of new life. She's been active this morning, Mara said softly, breaking the spell. I think she knows when I'm nervous. Legend carefully helped her to the small kitchen table. Sit. Eat something. His voice was gruff, but his hands were gentle as he arranged the food in front of her. As Mara took small bites of her sandwich, Legend settled into the chair across from her, studying her face. The morning light revealed dark circles under her eyes and a fading bruise along her jawline he hadn't noticed in the rain. Tell me about who you're running from, he said quietly. Mara's hands tightened around her coffee cup. His name is Shane. He's connected to the Aldrich family. They control most of the motorcycle clubs up north. She took a shaky breath. We met at a bar where I was waitressing. He seemed kind at first, but then... She trailed off, one hand unconsciously moving to protect her stomach. Legend felt something cold settle in his chest. He knew the Aldrichs by reputation. Old money mixed with dirty dealings, using motorcycle clubs as cover for their operations. How far along are you? He asked, changing the subject when he saw how pale she'd become. 7 months, she answered. I haven't had proper prenatal care. Shane wouldn't allow it. Legend stood up abruptly, pulling out his phone. Wait here. He stepped outside and made 3 quick calls. Within an hour, Shelley and Nora, 2 of the club members' wives, arrived with bags of maternity clothes and basic supplies. They fussed over Mara like mother hens, helping her sort through soft sweaters and comfortable pants while chattering about baby necessities. By mid-morning, Doc Wilson, the club's retired medic, had set up basic monitoring equipment in the safe house living room. He was a gentle older man who spoke in soothing tones as he checked Mara's blood pressure and listened to the baby's heartbeat. Everything sounds good, he assured them both, but she needs rest, proper nutrition, and regular checkups from here on out. Legend watched from the doorway as relief washed over Mara's face. He saw how she relaxed incrementally with each kind word, each small gesture of care, as if she was slowly allowing herself to believe she might be safe. The day passed quietly. Shelley and Nora took turns bringing meals and sitting with Mara, while Legend handled club business, but found himself checking the safe house security cameras more often than usual. As evening approached, he returned with a space heater he'd noticed the house lacking. The sun was setting, casting long shadows through the windows, and he found Mara sitting on the couch, humming softly. The melody stopped him in his tracks. It was Sarah's lullaby, but somehow it didn't hurt as much as he expected to hear it again. He plugged in the heater without comment, adjusting it to face the couch. Nights get cold here, he said gruffly. Mara wrapped her arms around herself, watching him with uncertain eyes. I should still go. I don't want to bring trouble to your door. Legend straightened up, looking at her directly for the first time since that morning. She was wearing one of the soft sweaters Shelley had brought, dark blue, making her look less pale. The bruise on her jaw was fading, but the fear in her eyes was still fresh. You can stay, he said finally. A little longer, until we figure things out. Relief and gratitude flickered across her face, but she simply nodded, understanding his need for space. Legend moved to the door, checking the locks one final time. Try to rest, he said, his voice softer than he intended. Then he stepped outside, closing the door firmly behind him. He leaned against the solid wood, letting out a long breath. The weight of the locket was still heavy in his pocket, but something else was growing alongside it, something that felt dangerously like hope. For the first time in 8 years, the curse that had ruled his life felt less like a certainty and more like a question waiting to be answered. The evening air was cool on his face as he straightened up and headed back to the clubhouse, leaving Mara safe behind locked doors, humming a lullaby that was slowly beginning to sound less like a ghost's whisper and more like a possibility of healing. Legend balanced 2 paper grocery bags against his hip as he unlocked the safe house door early the next morning. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows across the quiet street. He found Mara already awake, sitting at the small kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea. Her face looked less pale than yesterday, though dark circles still lingered under her eyes. "Brought some real food," he said, setting the bags on the counter. "Figured you might be tired of takeout." But Mara wasn't looking at the groceries. Her attention was fixed on a worn envelope lying on the table in front of her. The paper was yellowed with age, its corners soft from handling, though the seal remained unbroken. "My foster mother gave me this," she said quietly, running one finger along the edge. "Said it was for the day the truth becomes necessary. I've carried it with me for years, but I've never—" She swallowed hard. "I've never been brave enough to open it." Legend stopped unpacking the groceries, studying her face. "And now? After everything with the locket, with finding you?" She took a shaky breath. "I think maybe it's time." He pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. "You don't have to do this alone." Mara's hands trembled slightly as she picked up the envelope. With careful movements, she broke the seal and pulled out several sheets of paper covered in neat handwriting. As she unfolded them, a small newspaper clipping fluttered to the table. Legend picked it up, and his breath caught. It was a grainy photo from 20 years ago, a group of men standing outside a bank. He recognized several faces, including a younger version of Sarah's father. But it was another man that drew his attention, someone he'd seen in club photographs from the early days. "That's Thomas Aldrich," he said, his voice tight. "Shane's grandfather." Mara's hands were shaking harder now as she read through the pages. "My foster mother. She says here that my biological father worked for the Aldrichs. He was their accountant." She looked up at Legend, her eyes wide. "She says he helped them hide money, millions of dollars stolen from other clubs and businesses. But then he started keeping records, gathering evidence. And they killed him for it," Legend finished grimly. He'd heard whispers of the Aldrichs' betrayals over the years, how they'd manipulated club politics, turned brothers against each other, all while building their empire on stolen funds and broken trust. "There's more," Mara whispered, reading further. "My father, he encoded the proof of their crimes into his DNA records. Something about genetic markers and banking data." She pressed a hand to her swollen belly. My baby might carry that same genetic code." Legend felt cold understanding settle over him. "That's why Shane won't let you go. The Aldrichs need your child, not just as leverage but as proof of their crimes." Tears spilled down Mara's cheeks. "I can't let them have my baby, I won't." Legend stood up abruptly. "Pack your things. You're moving to the clubhouse today. It's more secure, more people to watch over you." That evening, Legend led Mara through the back entrance of the clubhouse. The main room was quiet, most of the younger members out on runs. He'd carefully timed their arrival to avoid too much attention. Shelley and Nora were waiting in the kitchen, just as he'd arranged. The 2 women immediately surrounded Mara with gentle concern. Shelley, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, carried an armful of soft blankets, while Nora held a covered dish that filled the air with the smell of home-cooked food. "You poor dear," Nora said, setting the food down to give Mara a careful hug. "We've fixed up the back room for you. Much cozier than that empty safe house." "And warmer, too," Shelley added, wrapping a knitted blanket around Mara's shoulders. "Can't have you catching cold in your condition." Legend watched as the women gently guided Mara to sit at the kitchen table, fussing over her like mother hens. They brought her tea and plates of still warm casserole, their chatter filling the room with comfortable normalcy. Slowly, the tension began to ease from Mara's shoulders. As night fell, Legend stationed his most trusted men, Jack and Marcus, outside the clubhouse doors. Both were veterans of multiple clubs, men who understood the importance of protection and discretion. "No one gets near her," Legend instructed them quietly. "I don't care if they're wearing club colors or a police uniform. Nobody without my direct approval." "You got it, boss," Jack nodded, his weathered face serious. "We'll keep her safe." Inside, Legend found Mara settled in the back room, surrounded by the comfort items Shelley and Nora had brought. She was curled up in an oversized armchair, the knitted blanket tucked around her, looking more peaceful than he'd seen her since she arrived. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything." Legend nodded, unable to find the right words. He checked the windows one final time, ensuring they were securely locked before heading to the door. "Get some rest," he said. "Jack and Marcus are outside. No one's getting past them." As he closed the door, he heard Shelley and Nora's voices in the kitchen, discussing breakfast plans for the morning. Their presence, along with his trusted guards, created a cocoon of safety around Mara. For tonight at least, she could sleep without fear. Legend walked to his office, the weight of the day's revelations heavy on his shoulders. The truth about Sarah's death, Mara's connection to it all, and now this unborn child carrying encoded proof of decades of crimes. It was almost too much to process. But one thing was clear. Protecting Mara and her baby had become more than just a matter of conscience. It was now a key to unraveling years of betrayal and lies. He picked up his phone to make some calls. If the Aldrichs were coming for Mara, he needed to be ready. This time he wouldn't let history repeat itself. This time he would stop the cycle of violence before it claimed another innocent life. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the dashboard as Legend drove his truck down the winding back roads. Beside him, Mara sat quietly, one hand resting protectively over her belly. He'd chosen a secluded clearing for their training, far enough from town to avoid prying eyes, but close enough to get back quickly if needed. "Here we are," Legend said, pulling onto a dirt path that opened into a sun-dappled meadow. Tall pines surrounded the space, creating natural privacy. The grass was soft underfoot as they stepped out of the truck. "It's beautiful," Mara breathed, taking in the peaceful scene. Legend pulled 2 foam practice pads from the truck bed. "Beauty won't protect you, but knowledge will." He faced her directly. "I'm going to teach you how to defend yourself, not from curses but from cowards who prey on those they think are weak." For the next hour, Legend guided Mara through basic defensive stances. His hands were gentle as he adjusted her posture, showing her how to maintain balance despite her changing center of gravity. "Keep your hands up," he demonstrated. "Protect your core. The baby makes you vulnerable there, so we'll focus on deflection and escape techniques." Mara proved to be a quick study, her movements becoming more confident with each repetition. During their water breaks, she shared stories about her past. "My foster mother, Claire, she was different from the others," Mara said, settling onto a fallen log. "She didn't just house kids. She loved us, taught us to see our own worth." Legend listened as she described Claire's small house filled with books and music, the garden where they grew vegetables, the quiet evenings spent reading together. "When I found out I was pregnant," Mara continued, her voice softening, "I was terrified, but Claire just hugged me and said, 'Now you have twice the reason to be strong.'" She wiped away a tear. She died 2 months later. That's when I found the envelope. Legend sat beside her, maintaining a careful distance. "I spent years believing I was cursed," he admitted. "Every death, every loss, I carried it all, blamed myself for Sarah, for the others who followed." "What changed?" He considered the question. "Nothing changed. I just got tired of letting fear control my life." They practiced for another hour, focusing on breaking holds and creating distance from attackers. Legend noticed how Mara's initial hesitation gave way to determination, her movements becoming more purposeful. When they returned to the clubhouse at midday, they were met with an unexpected sight. The common room had been transformed. Colorful streamers hung from the ceiling, and a table near the window displayed neatly arranged baby items, tiny clothes, soft blankets, and practical supplies. Shelley bustled over, beaming. "The ladies from First Baptist brought these by, said they heard we had someone in need." Nora emerged from the kitchen, carrying a plate of fresh cookies. "We thought it might brighten things up a bit. Every baby deserves a proper welcome." Mara's eyes filled with tears as she touched a small yellow onesie. "I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," Shelley insisted, pulling her into a gentle hug. "Just let us fuss over you a bit." The afternoon unfolded in a warm blur of conversation and laughter. The wives shared stories of their own children, offering advice and encouragement. Even some of the tougher bikers stopped by, awkwardly presenting handmade wooden toys and knitted caps. As evening approached, Legend drove Mara back to the safe house. They shared a simple dinner of soup and sandwiches at the small kitchen table, discussing plans for the days ahead. "We'll increase your training," Legend said, clearing their plates. "And I've got people looking into the Aldrich's movements. Knowledge is power. We need both." Mara nodded, stifling a yawn. The day's activities had clearly taken their toll. She settled onto the couch, pulling a donated blanket around her shoulders. "Try to rest," Legend said softly, moving to check the windows and doors. He watched as her eyes grew heavy, her breathing becoming deep and even. At the door, he paused. "I'll be right outside all night," he promised. "You're safe here." The lock clicked firmly into place as he stepped out into the evening air, taking up his guard position. Inside, Mara slept peacefully, surrounded by the tangible proof that she was no longer alone in her fight. Through the window, Legend could see the gentle rise and fall of her breathing, the new blanket wrapped securely around her. The simple sight stirred something in him, a feeling he'd long thought buried. Not the curse's familiar dread, but something warmer, like hope taking root despite his best defenses. The pale morning light had barely touched the horizon when Jake, one of Legend's most trusted men, pounded on his office door. Legend had dozed off in his chair, the events of recent days weighing heavily on his mind. "Boss, you need to see this," Jake said, his weathered face etched with concern. He dropped a thick manila envelope on the desk. "Found these in the old storage unit behind Murphy's Bar. They're club records from 1998, right before everything went bad." Legend pulled out yellowed papers and faded photographs, his eyes narrowing as he read. The documents detailed a violent power grab attempt by the Aldrich family 25 years ago. Meeting minutes, incident reports, and grainy surveillance photos painted a clear picture of calculated brutality. "They tried to take over through fear," Legend muttered, spreading the papers across his desk. "Same tactics they're using now with Mara?" Jake nodded grimly. "Same bloodline, too. That ex of hers, Shane Aldrich, he's carrying on the family tradition." Legend's jaw tightened as he studied a particular photograph, showing 3 men standing over a beaten club member. He recognized the eldest Aldrich's stance, the same threatening posture he'd seen in Shane during club gatherings. "History's repeating itself," Legend said, gathering the documents, "but this time we see it coming." He drove to the safe house, finding Mara already awake and making tea in the small kitchen. Morning sunlight streamed through the window, catching the gold highlights in her hair. She looked more rested than she had in days. "We need to talk," he said, placing the envelope on the table. They sat together as he explained what Jake had found. Mara's hands trembled slightly as she examined the old photographs. "I always sensed something dark in Shane's family," she admitted quietly. "The way they spoke about power, about controlling people. When I got pregnant," she placed a protective hand over her belly, "I started having nightmares about my baby growing up in that environment, learning to be cruel." Legend watched her face as she processed the information. "You were right to run." "These photos," she said, touching one gently. "The violence, the hatred. It's exactly what I saw in Shane's eyes when I told him I was leaving." They spent the afternoon methodically going through every document. Legend explained the club's history and structure, helping Mara understand the context of each piece of evidence. She proved to be sharp and analytical, picking up on patterns he hadn't noticed. "Look at these dates," she said, pointing to several incident reports. "They always struck during major club events, when everyone was distracted." Outside, Legend could hear his men implementing stricter security measures. Extra patrols circled the block, and new surveillance cameras were being installed. Shelley and Nora had organized a phone tree among the wives, ensuring everyone stayed alert and informed. As twilight approached, they moved to the old armchair by the window. The weight of their discoveries hung in the air, but something else was growing too, a sense of shared purpose, of fighting together rather than alone. Mara shifted in her seat, then reached for Legend's hand. His first instinct was to pull away, the old fear of his curse rising up, but she gently placed his palm against her rounded belly. "Wait," she whispered. Moments later, he felt it, a strong, decisive kick against his hand. His breath caught in his throat. "He does that whenever he hears your voice," Mara said softly. "I think he knows you're protecting us." Legend couldn't speak. The small life moving beneath his hand felt like a direct challenge to his years of self-imposed isolation. Another kick, as if emphasizing the point. They sat together in comfortable silence as darkness settled over the street. One by one, the old-fashioned streetlights flickered to life, casting warm pools of light on the sidewalk below. Neither felt the need to move or speak, sharing a moment of peace in the growing night. In that quiet moment, Legend realized something had shifted. The constant weight of his supposed curse felt lighter somehow, overshadowed by a different kind of power, the strength found in choosing to protect rather than withdraw, to fight rather than fear. Mara's hand still rested lightly over his, where it touched her belly, and the baby continued its gentle movements, as if approving this new connection forming between them. Outside, the streetlights created a protective circle of illumination around the safe house, while inside, two people who had been alone for so long found comfort in simply being together. The morning sun painted the safe house kitchen in warm, golden light as Legend moved with quiet purpose, measuring ingredients just as his mother had taught him decades ago. The familiar motions brought back memories of Sunday mornings in their small family kitchen. His mother's hands guiding his as they mixed pancake batter, her gentle voice explaining each step. He heard Mara's soft footsteps before she appeared in the doorway, wrapped in the oversized sweater Nora had brought her. Her eyes widened at the sight of bowls, measuring cups, and ingredients spread across the counter. "What's all this?" she asked, tucking her hair behind her ear. "My mother's recipe," Legend replied, whisking the batter with practiced strokes. She called them comfort cakes, pancakes with cinnamon and vanilla. Mara settled into a kitchen chair, watching as he poured perfect circles onto the griddle. The sweet aroma of vanilla and warming cinnamon filled the small space. "No one's ever," she started, then stopped as her voice caught. Legend turned to find tears sliding down her cheeks. "No one's ever cooked for me like this before." He placed a plate in front of her, golden pancakes topped with fresh berries and real maple syrup. When she took her first bite, more tears fell. "These taste like childhood should have been," she whispered. Legend felt something shift in his chest, a protective instinct that went beyond duty or obligation. He squeezed her shoulder gently before turning back to the stove. Later that morning, they walked the short distance to the clubhouse. The spring air was crisp and clean, birds calling from newly leafed trees. Legend noticed how Mara's steps had grown more confident over the past few days. The clubhouse common room had been transformed. Where normally there were scattered chairs and old newspapers, now there were neat piles of baby clothes, blankets, and supplies. Several of the wives had organized a donation drive through their church groups. "Look who's here!" Shelley called out, hurrying over to hug Mara. "We've got so much to show you." In one corner, Bear, one of the most intimidating members of the club, sat in a worn armchair, thick fingers working knitting needles with surprising delicacy. His weathered face was creased in concentration as he shaped tiny blue booties. "My grandma taught me," he grumbled when he caught Mara staring. "Figured every baby needs warm feet." Across the room, Diesel had set up a painting station. The old wooden crib they'd found at a thrift store was being transformed with careful strokes of white paint, delicate vines and leaves beginning to curl around the rails. "Just because we're rough doesn't mean the little one's nursery has to be," he explained with a shy smile. Throughout the afternoon, Mara moved among the wives, accepting their gifts and advice with genuine gratitude. Legend watched from his usual corner, noting how naturally she fit into their makeshift family. Every so often, she would begin humming that haunting lullaby, the one that had first connected them. Each time, the melody wrapped around his heart, softening edges he'd thought would stay sharp forever. As evening approached, they returned to the safe house. Legend carried a box of carefully folded baby clothes, while Mara clutched a handmade blanket from Nora. The peaceful rhythm of the day had created a comfortable silence between them. In the safe house living room, Mara discovered a small stack of children's books on the coffee table, another gift from the wives. On top sat a worn copy of Good Night Moon, its corners softened by years of bedtime readings. "This was Sarah's favorite," Legend said quietly, picking up the book. His fiancée had read it countless times to her younger siblings. "Read it?" Mara asked, settling onto the couch. "For the baby?" Legend hesitated, then sat beside her. He opened the book, and in his deep, gravelly voice began, "In the great green room." Mara's giggle interrupted him. "Sorry, it's just your voice, reading about little bunnies and kittens." Her eyes danced with amusement. Legend felt heat rise in his cheeks, a sensation so foreign he almost didn't recognize it. He couldn't remember the last time he'd blushed. "Well, guess I'll have to practice," he mumbled, but couldn't help smiling slightly. They read through several books together, Mara occasionally teasing him about his serious delivery of lines about teddy bears and dancing mice. As night settled around the safe house, Legend noticed her eyelids growing heavy. "Here," he said, helping her lie down on the couch. He tucked the new blanket around her, making sure she had enough support for her back. "You're safe here." The words came naturally now, no longer just a duty, but a promise he intended to keep with every fiber of his being. He stepped outside into the cool night air, letting it fill his lungs. Stars winked overhead, peaceful and constant. Legend allowed himself to acknowledge how much had changed in just a few days, how the walls he'd built around his heart were slowly, steadily crumbling in the face of Mara's gentle presence and the new life she carried. The morning dawned with deceptive calm. Legend balanced a paper bag of fresh pastries and hot coffee as he approached the safe house, nodding to Mike, one of his most trusted guards, who had been stationed at the corner all night. The other guard, Danny, should have been visible from the front steps, but his post was empty. Legend's stride faltered. His free hand instinctively moved toward the weapon at his hip as his eyes scanned the quiet street. Nothing seemed immediately wrong. Birds were singing, a neighbor was watering plants, the morning sun cast long shadows across the pavement. But years of survival had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now, every nerve ending was firing warnings. He keyed the lock and called out, "Mara, everything okay in there?" Her reply came quickly, muffled through the door. "Yes, just finishing getting dressed." Something in her voice sounded strained, but it could have been morning fatigue. Still, Legend's unease grew when Danny didn't respond to his radio check. He set the breakfast items on the front step and drew his phone, sending a quick alert to his second-in-command to start checking the perimeter. "I'm going to do a quick walk around," he called through the door. "Stay inside, okay?" "Okay," came Mara's response, even more tension in it now. Legend moved quietly along the side of the house, scanning for any signs of disturbance. When he rounded the corner to check the back door, his blood ran cold. Fresh letters had been carved deep into the wooden door, the splinters still sharp and pale. "The curse ends tonight." His heart hammering, Legend sprinted back to the front of the house, weapon drawn. The neighbor with the watering can was gone. The street was eerily silent now. No birds, no traffic sounds, nothing but the rush of blood in his ears as he shouldered through the front door. "Mara?" The living room was a battlefield. The coffee table lay shattered, books and baby clothes scattered across the floor. One of the dining chairs was broken, a leg missing. And there, glinting in a shaft of morning sunlight, lay the locket, the one piece of evidence connecting their pasts. A faint scream echoed from somewhere outside, quickly muffled. Legend burst through the back door in time to see a dark van accelerating down the alley, its tires throwing gravel as it cornered sharply onto the main road. "No, no, no," he muttered, running back through the house and out front. He found Danny unconscious behind some bushes, a nasty welt rising on his temple. Mike was nowhere to be seen. Legend's phone was already at his ear. "Code Red. They have her. Industrial District. Full ride now." Within 15 minutes, the clubhouse garage was filled with the low rumble of motorcycles warming up. Legend stood in the growing shadows, his helmet gripped so tightly his knuckles showed white. The same darkness that had taken Sarah all those years ago was reaching for Mara now. But this time, he knew exactly what they were facing. The tire tracks in the alley matched descriptions from old police reports. Reports about the night Sarah died, when a similar van had been seen leaving an abandoned warehouse. Now Mara's ex and his family were using the same playbook, thinking they could replay history. "They're trying to trigger the curse," Legend growled to his assembled men. "They want me to believe it's happening again." He pulled on his helmet, the familiar weight settling like armor. "But this time we know where they're going. This time we're ready. And this time?" His voice hardened to steel. "This time we ride before sunset." The garage door rolled up, revealing the golden afternoon light. 20 bikes roared to life in perfect unison. "We ride," Legend ordered, and led his men out into the streets, the thunder of their engines drowning out the echoes of the past. In his mind, he could still hear Mara's muffled scream. He could see the broken chair, the scattered baby clothes, the cruel message carved into the door. But strongest of all, he felt the weight of his promise. "You're safe here." He had failed to keep that promise once. The familiar guilt tried to rise up, but legend pushed it down. This wasn't about the curse anymore. This was about protecting the future. Mara's future, her baby's future, and maybe even his own. The sun was dropping toward the horizon as their bikes streaked toward the industrial district. Legend led them with grim determination, his body tense with controlled fury. He had lost too much to this darkness already. He would not lose Mara, too. Behind him, his men rode in tight formation, their collective purpose clear. Thou, curse would end tonight, not through death, but through justice long delayed. The industrial district loomed ahead like a graveyard of abandoned dreams. Rows of weathered warehouses cast long shadows in the fading light, their broken windows staring like hollow eyes. Legend led his men through the maze of empty streets, their engines now hushed to a low rumble. He raised his fist, signaling the group to stop. In the soft dirt near one of the loading docks, fresh boot prints marked a clear trail. Multiple sets of footprints, one smaller and clearly dragged between two larger ones. Legend's jaw clenched at the sight. "Split into groups of 4, he ordered quietly. "Radio silence unless you find something." The bikers dispersed like smoke, their leather cuts disappearing into the growing darkness. Legend moved forward with 3 of his most trusted men, following the trail to a familiar building that made his heart stutter in his chest. Building 13, the same warehouse where Sarah had died. Legend's hands trembled as he pushed open the rusty door. The hinges creaked, the sound echoing through the cavernous space. Pale light filtered through dirty skylights, illuminating a scene that stopped him cold. A single chair sat in the center of the concrete floor, ropes coiled beside it. A table held various tools, laid out with cruel precision. And there, spray-painted on the wall in fresh red paint, were the words, "History repeats." Legend's knees hit the concrete. His chest constricted as memories flooded back. Sarah's body, the blood, his own screams echoing off these same walls. The guilt he'd carried for 20 years crashed over him like a wave, threatening to pull him under. "Boss," one of his men whispered, reaching for his shoulder. But Legend couldn't hear him. His world had narrowed to that chair, that table, those ropes. He'd failed again. The curse had won. Another innocent woman would die because he dared to care. "I'm sorry," he choked out, his voice raw. "I'm so sorry, Mara. I should have known better than to—" Then he heard it. Faint but clear, drifting through the thin wall from somewhere nearby, came a gentle melody. A familiar lullaby, sung in a trembling but determined voice. "Sleep, my child, and peace attend thee, all through the night." Mara's voice. She was alive. Legend's head snapped up, his eyes clearing. The sound seemed to wash away the shadows of the past, replacing despair with steel-hard purpose. "Guardian angels God will send thee, all through the night." He pushed himself to his feet, wiping roughly at his face. His men watched as their leader straightened to his full height, shoulders squaring. "She's close," Legend said, his voice steady now. "Radio the others. Every building gets searched, top to bottom. We move in pairs, maintain visual contact at all times." He drew his weapon, checking it with practiced efficiency. "And when we find her," his eyes hardened, "we end this, once and for all." The lullaby continued, barely audible but persistent, like a thread of hope in the darkness. Legend signaled his men to move out, dividing the search grid with hand gestures. They melted into the shadows of the warehouse district, guided by that distant melody and driven by their leader's unwavering determination. As Legend disappeared into the gathering dusk, one thought burned in his mind. This time, the curse would break. This time, love would win. Legend moved silently through the darkened corridors, following Mara's voice like a beacon. The lullaby grew stronger as he approached a heavy metal door at the end of a narrow hallway. His men spread out behind him, weapons ready. Through the door's small window, he could see her. Mara sat bound to a chair, her pregnant belly protruding beneath her torn sweater. Despite her obvious fear, she continued singing, her voice wavering but determined. A tall man paced in front of her, Shane Aldrich, her ex, while two armed guards stood watch. Legend's blood boiled as he watched Shane grab Mara's face, forcing her to look at him. "You thought you could hide from me?" Shane's voice carried through the door. "My family built this empire. We own these streets. And that baby? That's my ticket back to power." "Now," Legend whispered into his radio. His men burst through side entrances while he kicked open the main door, the metal hinges shrieking in protest. Shane spun around, yanking Mara's chair in front of him like a shield. "Well, well, the cursed king himself." He pressed a gun against Mara's temple. "One more step and she dies like your precious Sarah did." Legend held his position, hands raised slightly. "Let her go, Shane. Your family's crimes end tonight." "Crimes?" Shane laughed bitterly. "We made this club what it is. Then your bleeding heart ruined everything." He tightened his grip on Mara. "But now I've got leverage. The DNA in this baby will prove my bloodline. The old guard will have to accept me back." Behind Shane, Legend's men were quietly subduing the guards. One went down with a muffled grunt, then the other. Shane was too focused on Legend to notice. "You're right about one thing," Legend said, taking a careful step forward. "This ends tonight, but not how you think." Mara's eyes met Legend's, and in that moment, an understanding passed between them. She suddenly threw her head back, catching Shane in the chin. He stumbled, his grip loosening just enough. Legend lunged forward as Mara twisted sideways in the chair, sending both herself and the furniture crashing away from Shane's grasp. The gun went off, the bullet embedding in the ceiling as Legend tackled Shane to the ground. They fought brutally, rolling across the concrete floor. Shane fought with desperate fury, but Legend's rage was cold and focused. He knocked the gun away, deflected a wild punch, and pinned Shane with decades of hard-earned skill. "Do it!" Shane spat blood, struggling. "Kill me like you want to." Legend's fist raised, trembling with the urge to end it all. But Mara's voice cut through his fury. "Legend, please!" she called from where his men were untying her. "Don't become what he is. We need justice, not more violence." The words penetrated Legend's anger. Slowly, he lowered his fist. "You're right." He looked down at Shane with contempt. "He's not worth it." Suddenly, police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. One of Shane's guards, looking ashamed, stepped forward. "I called them," he admitted. "Been watching him hurt people too long. Left an anonymous tip." Legend's men quickly secured Shane and his remaining loyal followers. Within minutes, the warehouse filled with flashing blue and red lights as police cars surrounded the building. As officers swarmed in, Legend rushed to Mara's side. She fell into his arms, her whole body shaking. "You came for me," she whispered against his chest. "I was so scared, but I kept singing, hoping you'd hear." "I'll always come for you," Legend promised, holding her close. His voice was rough with emotion. "Always." They watched as Shane and his men were led away in handcuffs, their protests fading into the night. An officer approached to take their statements, but Legend's men stepped forward, handling the authorities with practiced ease. "Let's get you home," Legend said softly, wrapping his jacket around Mara's shoulders. She nodded, exhausted but relieved. Outside, the night had grown cold. Legends Motorcycle Club formed a protective circle around them as they walked to the bikes. Red and blue lights still flashed across the warehouse walls, but their harsh glare felt like victory now, not threat. Legend helped Mara onto his bike, making sure she was secure before starting the engine. The rest of the club fell into formation around them, their engines rumbling to life in the darkness. Under the swirling police lights, they pulled away from the warehouse district, leaving behind the shadows of the past and riding together toward home. The clubhouse buzzed with activity as Legend's motorcycle thundered into the parking lot, followed by the rest of the convoy. Doc, the club's medical expert, was already waiting at the entrance, his weathered face creased with concern. He rushed forward as Legend helped Mara dismount, her legs still shaky from the ordeal. "Let's get you checked out, sweetheart," Doc said kindly, supporting her other side. "Need to make sure both you and the little one are okay." They settled Mara in the club's medical room, a space that had seen its share of patch-ups over the years, but never felt as important as it did now. Legend paced outside while Doc performed his examination, his boots wearing a path in the old wooden floor. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, Doc emerged with a relieved smile. "They're both fine," he announced. "Baby's got a strong heartbeat, and Mama here is just exhausted. Some bruising from the ropes, but nothing serious." Legend's shoulders sagged with relief. He entered the room to find Mara sitting up on the examination table, her hands protectively cradling her belly. Their eyes met, and the connection between them felt stronger than ever. Meanwhile, in the main room, Legend's men were organizing stacks of documents, years of financial records, old photographs, and the damning contents of the envelope Mara's foster mother had left behind. 2 police detectives arrived, looking somewhat uncomfortable in the biker clubhouse, but professional nonetheless. "Detective Martinez?" The female officer introduced herself. "This is Detective Chen. We understand you have evidence regarding several cold cases?" The older bikers, men who had been with the club since the beginning, stepped forward with their testimonies. One by one, they detailed the gradual takeover attempts by the Aldrich family, the manipulation, the violence that had been disguised as accidents. "And this," Legend's right-hand man said, placing the envelope on the table, "proves they were behind Sarah's death all those years ago. They wanted to isolate Legend, make him believe he was cursed so he'd step away from leadership." The detectives pored over the documents, their expressions growing grimmer with each page. Detective Martinez looked up at Legend, who had joined them. "This is extensive," she said. "Bank records, threatening letters, even DNA test results. The Aldrichs have been playing a very long game." "They wanted power," Legend replied quietly. "They nearly destroyed everything to get it." Throughout the afternoon, more officers arrived, collecting evidence and taking statements. The club members cooperated fully, decades of silence finally breaking. The truth about Sarah's death hit Legend hard. She hadn't died because of any curse, but because she had discovered the Aldrichs' attempt to embezzle club funds and threaten their way into control. As evening approached, the police presence gradually diminished, leaving behind business cards and promises of justice. The clubhouse began to settle into a different kind of quiet. Not the tense silence of secrets, but the peaceful calm of truth finally spoken. Shelley and Nora, the wives who had first welcomed Mara, took charge of making her comfortable. They transformed one of the clubhouse's guest rooms into a cozy sanctuary, complete with fresh linens, warm blankets, and even a small vase of wildflowers. "Your family now," Shelley declared, fluffing pillows with determined energy. "And family takes care of each other." Nora nodded, arranging some borrowed maternity clothes in the dresser. "We protect our own," she added softly. Over the next few days, the clubhouse became a healing space. Members dropped by with small gifts, home-cooked meals, baby supplies, books to pass the time. Mara thanked each one personally, her genuine gratitude touching even the toughest bikers. "Thank you for the baby blanket," she told old Jake, who blushed beneath his gray beard. "Did you really knit it yourself?" "My mama taught me," he mumbled, but his eyes sparkled with pride. "Thought the little one might need something special." The gruff mechanic who had painted the crib brought more supplies, explaining how his own daughter had just outgrown them. "No sense letting good things go to waste," he said, but his smile was warm. Legend watched these interactions from a distance at first, still processing the weight of truth. The curse that had haunted him for so long had never been supernatural, just the calculated actions of greedy men using fear as a weapon. Each revelation helped lift the burden he'd carried for years. On the third evening after the rescue, Legend found Mara in her room, sitting in a comfortable chair by the window. The setting sun painted the walls in warm colors, and she looked more peaceful than he'd ever seen her. "How are you feeling?" he asked, pulling up another chair beside her. "Safer than I've ever felt," she answered honestly. "Everyone here, they're so kind, so real." Legend nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. The facade of toughness his club presented to the world masked hearts of genuine gold. Mara reached for his hand then, placing it gently on her rounded belly. The baby moved beneath his palm, a strong, decisive kick that made them both smile. "He knows you saved us," she whispered, her eyes meeting Legend's. "He knows who his protector is." Legend felt something shift inside him, the last remnants of his fear of attachment melting away. This wasn't a curse. This was a blessing, a chance to protect and care for someone again, a chance to heal. The baby kicked once more, as if in agreement, and Legend smiled, a real, unguarded smile that reached his eyes and erased years of pain from his face. 2 weeks passed peacefully at the clubhouse, each day bringing new hope and healing. The early morning sun had just begun to peek through the windows when Mara's first contraction hit. She was helping Shelley organize baby clothes in the common room when she suddenly gripped the table, her breath catching. "Legend!" Shelley's voice rang through the clubhouse. "It's time!" The reaction was immediate. Years of operating as a tight-knit unit had taught the club members to move swiftly in a crisis. Legend burst through the door, his usual composed demeanor replaced by wide-eyed concern. He reached Mara just as another contraction made her gasp. "I'm here," he said softly, supporting her weight. "I've got you." The clubhouse erupted into organized chaos. Nora took charge, directing traffic like a seasoned general. "Boil water," she commanded. "Bring clean towels. Someone call Dr. Matthews." Burly bikers who normally intimidated hardened criminals now paced nervously, their boots wearing paths in the floor. Old Jake wrung his hands, muttering prayers under his breath. The mechanic who'd painted the crib kept checking his watch every 30 seconds. In the makeshift birthing room, formerly Legend's office, now transformed with a comfortable bed and medical supplies, Mara worked through each contraction with determined grace. Legend never left her side, letting her squeeze his hand until his fingers turned white. "You're doing amazing," he encouraged, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. "Just breathe, like we practiced." Hours passed. The sun climbed higher in the sky as Mara's labor intensified. Outside the room, the club members maintained their vigil. Some played cards to stay distracted, while others simply sat in tense silence, jumping at every sound from behind the closed door. "Remember," Mara panted between contractions, "the lullaby?" Legend didn't hesitate. In a low, gentle voice that would have shocked anyone who knew him only as the tough club leader, he began to sing the familiar melody. The same lullaby that had first connected them, that had helped lead him to her in the warehouse. Now it helped guide their child into the world. When the baby's first cry pierced the air, a collective cheer erupted through the clubhouse. The sound of celebrating bikers echoed off the walls as Dr. Matthews announced, "It's a boy!" Legend stared in wonder as the nurse placed the cleaned and swaddled infant in his arms. The baby was tiny, perfect, with a shock of dark hair and surprisingly strong fingers that immediately wrapped around Legend's pinky. Tears fell freely down his face as he studied every detail of this miraculous new life. The club members filed in quietly to meet their newest family member, grown men wiping their eyes unashamedly. Shelley and Nora hovered nearby, beaming like proud aunties. Even the gruffest members couldn't hide their joy at this moment of pure happiness. "Look what we did," Mara whispered tiredly from the bed, her face glowing despite her exhaustion. "Look who we brought into the world." Legend sat carefully beside her, still cradling the baby. "He's perfect," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. "Maybe we were meant to find each other," Mara said softly, reaching out to touch the baby's cheek. "Maybe this baby was the blessing you were always denied." Looking at her words sink deep into Legend's heart, washing away the last shadows of his past pain. With profound tenderness, he leaned down and pressed a kiss to his son's forehead. In that moment, he felt the final weight of the supposed curse lift completely from his shoulders. The morning sun streamed through the windows, bathing the three of them in warm light as their extended family gathered close. Old Jake offered another prayer of thanks. Shelley and Nora fussed over Mara while wiping happy tears. The mechanic proudly announced the crib was ready whenever they needed it. Legend looked around at these people who had become so much more than just a club. He saw love in every face, felt it in every gentle touch and quiet word. This was his family, their family, bound not by blood, but by something even stronger: choice, loyalty, and unconditional acceptance. Sitting there in the sunlight, holding his son while Mara rested against his shoulder, Legend finally understood. It hadn't been a curse that shaped his life. It had been the journey to this moment. Every step, every loss, every fear had led him here, to this perfect morning where love, family, and faith revealed themselves as the true miracles they'd always been. The afternoon sun filtered through the clubhouse windows, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. An unusual hush had fallen over the normally boisterous space, with hardened bikers speaking in whispers and moving with careful steps. Their respect for the sleeping newborn transformed these tough men into gentle giants. In the guest room, freshly arranged with soft blankets and a wooden rocking chair, Mara cradled their son against her chest. Her tired eyes held a contentment that made her whole face glow. Legend sat nearby in a straight-backed wooden chair, his normally stern expression softened as he watched his newfound family. The baby stirred, his tiny face scrunching up before letting out a small, insistent cry. Without hesitation, Legend rose and carefully lifted him from Mara's arms. His large hands, which had seen so many battles, now cradled the infant with incredible gentleness. "I've got you, little man," he murmured, beginning to pace the room in slow, measured steps. Then, something remarkable happened. Legend began to hum, the same lullaby that had once filled him with dread and painful memories. Now the melody flowed naturally, bringing comfort rather than fear. The baby settled against his chest, tiny fingers curling into his shirt. Mama Joyce appeared in the doorway, her arms laden with fresh baked bread and soup. Behind her, Shelley and Nora peeked in, carrying soft blankets and tiny handmade gifts, a knitted cap, miniature booties, a small stuffed bear. "We thought you might need some nourishment," Mama Joyce whispered, her eyes twinkling with joy as she watched Legend with the baby. The setting sun painted the room in warm, golden light, creating a peaceful sanctuary within the clubhouse walls. Mara reached out her hand toward Legend, her eyes filled with hope. "I want us to build a life together," she whispered. "A place where all three of us can heal." Legend took her hand, feeling decades of grief and guilt finally release their hold on his heart. "We will," he promised softly. "You'll both be safe, loved, surrounded by family. No more curses, just us, making something new." The baby had drifted back to sleep against Legend's chest, his tiny breaths steady and peaceful. Looking at Mara's serene face, Legend knew with absolute certainty that they had crossed a threshold together into a future brighter than any he'd dared to imagine. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.